more here. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. I'm coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Beautiful day here in the mountains. Today on the show, we have Byron Metcalf. Byron has been somebody I've been following for a long time, probably since like 2004, I think. And he's a long-time holotropic breathwork guy. He's got a lot of other stuff going too. So I'm going to read a little bit of this biography here. It might be a little too long, but hopefully it helps. Byron is an award-winning musician and recording artist, shamanic practitioner, and ceremonial leader. Byron's highly successful music business career spans over 5 decades and cover a wide variety of musical styles and genres. Byron was a professional drummer at age 15 and played on several gold and platinum albums, most notably the Kenny Rogers album, The Gambler. He has performed at top concert venues, including Carnegie Hall, the Greek Theater, the LA Forum, Universal Amphitheater, the Grand Ole Opry, and Wembley Arena in London, as well as headliner showrooms in Vegas, Reno, Tahoe. Byron also performed on The Tonight Show, the Grammy Awards, America Music Awards, CMA Awards, ACM Awards, Fantasy Island, Hee Haw, Good Old Nashville Music, and many more. In '98, Byron began focusing his musical talents towards the healing arts, creating musical sequences for holotropic breathwork workshops, and facilitating men's workshops and shamanic drumming circles and ceremonies. Since '97, Byron has been producing solo CD projects and collaborating with other artists such as Steve Roach, Mark Seelig, Dash Mesh, Khalsa, Ron Oates, and several other musical guests. Byron's 1998 solo release, Helpers, Guides, and Allies, was rated number 4 in Backroads Music's 98 Best of Year selection in the world music category. Byron collaborated with award-winning recording artist and sonic innovator Steve Roach on the critically acclaimed 2-disc epic, The Serpent's Lair. I can totally attest to that. It's pretty awesome. There's a whole bunch more here. He's done some stuff with Hemisync, which is kind of a binaural beat situation that's really, really interesting. I spent a lot of time personally with that album. And Byron is a transpersonal guide and educator, shamanic practitioner, researcher, and professional musician. Byron holds a PhD in transpersonal psych, a master's in counseling psych, and is a certified grad of Grof Transpersonal Training and Psychia Institute's Psycho-Spiritual Integration Program. Byron has trained, studied, and worked with shamans, healers, and psycho-spiritual teachers from many parts of the world, including Stan Grof, Jack Kornfield, Hamid Ali, John Davis, PhD, Angeles Ariane, PhD, Jose and Lena Stevens, Sandra Ingerman, and Don Americo Yabar. For nearly 3 decades, Byron has been intensely involved in consciousness research and spiritual development, specializing in the transformative potential of alternative states of consciousness. As a drummer, percussionist, and recording engineer, Byron produces music for deep inner exploration, breathwork, shamanic journey work, body-oriented therapies, various meditation practices, and the healing arts. Byron also served as a graduate advisor to the Prescott College's Counseling Psychology Master's Degree program. Byron recently retired from his professional counseling practice of over 20 years in order to devote his full energies to holo shamanic strategies and its training program development, and also to allow more time in his recording studio. As a workshop, retreat, and ceremonial leader with over 25 years experience, Byron has facilitated personal growth and healing workshops featuring holotropic and holoshamanic breathwork and the Shaman's Heart program throughout the U.S. Byron has also been a featured presenter at seminars and conferences on the healing potential of non-ordinary states of consciousness, music, sound, and technologies. Byron lives in the high desert mountains of Prescott Valley, Arizona, and is the founding director of Holoshamanic Strategies, offering spiritual and shamanic counseling, healing services, and experiential learning programs. So there you have it. It's a pretty beefy intro for Byron. I hope that helps set the stage for him. He's got an epic career. He's done a lot of work with a lot of very interesting people. Got a really interesting background himself. And yeah, again, I've been following his work for a very long time because I ran into him on a number of early holotropic breathwork email lists, I guess, before there were really forums or Facebook, really. So that was cool. And I've been really following him ever since. So I hope you like this. I hope this is helpful in terms of figuring out how to do music for sessions, both breathwork, shamanic, and otherwise. And hope it just, strikes some curiosity in there for you. And maybe you can dig in a little deeper for your, music understanding, your approach towards music and sessions, and much more. So I think that's it for the intro for the episode. Enjoy it. If you want to help us out, you can leave us a small monthly donation at Patreon, patreon.com/psychedelics today. We have all sorts of perks in there, including some intermittent meetups where we just hang out for a few hours and shoot the shit. And it's great. Also, what else can you do? Leave us a review on your podcast app, like on your iPhone, hit podcast, and you can just find us there and leave a review. It's super simple, helps us a ton. If you want to do the same over on Facebook, we would love that too. Facebook.com/psychedelics today/reviews. And also remember, we have some free classes at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. You can sign up for those for free. No charge, no credit card required, nothing. And there's some great stuff there. So check it out. Hope to see you on the other side. One more word from a sponsor, and we'll see you at the end. This episode is brought to you by Mudwater. Mudwater is a coffee alternative with 4 medicinal mushrooms and adaptogens. With 1/7 the caffeine is a cup of coffee, you get sustainable energy without the anxiety and jitters of coffee. Kyle and I have had about 3 months worth of Mudwater, and we really like it a lot. Mudwater has really helped me slow down my coffee consumption, and I feel great after drinking it. Another thing I like about this company is that they donate a portion of each month's revenue to MAPS. Check them out at mudwater.com, mudwtr.com. Use the code psychedelic at checkout for 15% off. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have Byron Metcalf. Thanks for joining us, Byron.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for bringing me on, man. I've really been looking forward to this time with you and to explore this area because, this is where I live,
Yeah. And you've been around doing this stuff for quite a bit of time. And my guess is that you have a lot to share and teach people on this topic because it is a little esoteric at times. Music is a little esoteric at times, but then add in psychedelics and breathwork or something, and then it's a totally different beast.
Oh yeah. And you're right. I mean, I've been living in this world actively, and my time with Grof, I first got introduced to Stan's work back in '85. So that'll give you, a good sense of it, and your listeners a good sense of, how long I've been in the holotropic community.
Cool. So before we dig into Stan Grof and others, and how you kind of encountered that, what was your musical background before? I know we chatted about it on our last phone call, but can you give like a brief sketch? I know it's hard to do it in brief.
Sure. Yeah, a brief sketch because it's a lot, but I'll keep it brief. My father, he wasn't a musician. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, but my father wasn't a musician, but he loved all kinds of music, and he was a record collector. So I grew up. I mean, he just music was in the house all the time, and all kinds of music, and he loved every genre of music except opera, I think. So I grew up listening to classical and country, what country was back then, and pop music, but especially big band jazz and all forms of jazz. And so it was just, I just loved it. I loved every bit of it. And I saw the Gene Krupa story when I was just a kid. I went to the movies and it just caught me, and I got some drumsticks and started beating on everything. And my father finally, I'm going very quickly here. My father bought me a drum set, and I started taking a few lessons, but mostly self-taught. And 9 months later, I'm playing in bars and clubs around Phoenix. It was mostly country music and stuff because that's what was happening. But I didn't really care. I just wanted to play, and so it just continued. And I must have had some innate talent because my career grew. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I'm working 6 nights a week in a clubs and had some students and that kind of thing. And so it was, a lot of lucky breaks and being at the right place and the right time. Went to L.A. and joined a band there and ended up in Nashville, being a studio musician, and played on the Kenny Rogers Gambler album on a couple of tracks there and some other things. But that was the biggest record I ever played on. So I think it's sold like 33 million copies to date. Pretty amazing. So, but I got out of the music business because I just kind of got bored with it. I'd done a lot of things and accomplished a lot of my, the goals that I had, and I just made a complete 180 and got out of it. I quit and started doing some counseling and stuff. And I was really interested in inner work. I just call it a midlife correction. That's what Angela Sarian, one of my teachers, used to call it. To avoid a midlife crisis, let's try and make it a midlife correction. So I was really in that mode, in that zone, and. A year into that career of doing some counseling with substance abuse and that kind of thing, I was introduced to Stan's work by just going to a workshop for continuing education credits. And I knew nothing about him or holotropic breathwork or any of that.
And where was it?
But I was just it was in Texas, in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
And Jacquelyn Small and Stan and Christina were all working together at the time. It's a really big event, but it just, changed my life. I mean, it literally just like, what is this? How is this even possible to just do some deep breathing and listen to this incredible music? I felt like, what it reminded me of was a psychedelic experience. And so, I immediately saw the potential in it and got involved in the training early on and was certified with him in '89. So, and of course, how the breath work, how that method, that model uses music was just kind of just perfect fit for me. And, I'd already had, I'd had recording studios and stuff. So I knew the gear and all the technical aspects of it pretty well. So I was really comfortable with being able to mix and put together playlists and, sessions and all that kind of thing. And so we're covering about 30 years there. So, or more, 50 years, let me put it that way. So that's a snippet. So, if you want more specifics, we can get into that, but, I can just talk about that part forever, I really am grateful, and I'm so fortunate to have had so many opportunities and, just grace, I guess, being at the right place, the right time, and lots of things open up, doors open that I can't even, I don't even know how it happened. But I'm glad it did, So, and I've learned how to trust that and trust my own guidance, my own innate inner guidance. That's part of what this work is all about, is learning how to do that in a clearer way. The obscurations and obstacles and blocks and barriers, to really see what the truth is. And, that'll help you, certainly help me to make some skillful decisions and sometimes not so skillful, that goes with it. So
yeah, absolutely. So you went into this continuing ed course with Stan, Christina, and Jacquelyn Small, and you didn't really know what the work was like at that point on your way in?
I didn't know anything. And when I say anything, I had not a clue. I was just going to, actually it was happenstance because one of the other counselors at this center I was working at was scheduled to go, but then couldn't. And they said, hey, would you, here's a chance to get some continuing ed credits, for just certification and all that stuff. And would you like to go? And I said, well, sure, And so I did, without knowing anything about it. Absolutely nothing. I'd never read anything by Stan Grof, didn't know who he was. I knew who Jacquelyn Small was because she had been doing some writing that was that people in the substance abuse treatment field were on top of and liked and incorporated into the work. It was a transpersonal first. I guess I want to say it this way. She was the first one to write really about the transpersonal approach to working with addictions of all kinds.
Mm. So was her orientation more addiction focused than Stan's?
Well, not necessarily, but that was she just wrote this. She had this little handbook that became very popular. It's called "Becoming Naturally Therapeutic," and it became like a Bible for a lot of counselors and stuff. It's like this is the just a foundational kind of thing. And it was very popular back then, and sold well, and it got very popular in the addiction field, and so that opened the door for her to get more involved in it. I think that's how it happened. I mean, she didn't work, specifically with addictions at all. She was a social worker, I think, licensed social worker, and was really involved in spiritual pursuits and the transpersonal world and that whole framework. So,
yeah, that's huge. I think at this point it's worth noting that you got trained in both the Grof Transpersonal Training holotropic breathwork world and also Jacquelyn Small's kind of offshoot that had some slight differences.
It's slight. It's so slight. Well, back then it was so slight. It was, wasn't even, you couldn't even distinguish it. So sometimes Jackie's sessions would be a little shorter. But everything else was, was the same thing back then. I think it's probably different, somewhat different now, but I don't know. But yeah, they were the whole thing was integrated. So they were all training and teaching. And Jackie's husband, I think I mentioned this to you in our earlier chat, that Greg Zalonka, he was doing all the promoting for the workshops and the retreats and all the trainings and everything else. And he was very good at that and really helped to bring the holotropic breath work and the work in general and transpersonal exploration to a new level in terms of his marketing skills and putting together conferences and that kind of thing.
Right, that's amazing. Yeah, I used to actually facilitate breath work with somebody who went through Jacquelyn's training in Boston, so that was really interesting because there was no real conflict ideologically or in practice or anything. So I really, really appreciated that. And it was nice to know that there was other groups out there doing very similar, if not identical stuff.
Yeah. Well, they had some philosophical differences that were very clear. And, and right after, I think they did one more group of certified people after mine before they split with their own ways. And so then they didn't work together after that. And that was fine. That was just how it all evolved. And, Stan and Christina went, more doing what they were doing. And Jackie was able to incorporate more of of what she was interested in, some of the esoteric teachings and things like that into her work and what she was teaching in her writings. So.
Yeah, that's cool. And other than the experience feeling like a psychedelic experience, was there anything else that impressed you in your first or subsequent breathwork sessions?
Oh yeah, I mean, the kind of that first kind of awe got grounded in when I say got grounded, I mean I started really working well. Where can this take us? Rather than just kind of being, wow, this blew me away, and what did I experience? Well, then started working on birth trauma and, Stan's model of the perinatal matrices and all of that, and just healing my own wounds. And that's the focus of the training. You're doing your own work because the best healers or the best facilitators, the therapists, whatever, are the ones who really have done their own work. And in fact, I don't trust anybody that hasn't. So, because there's too much projection going on, but it was able, I was able to have experiences that really clarified things for me and integrated, and I would use the term healed some issues and gave me insights into things that, just wouldn't have come any other way. Could have come through, when I say any other way, any other, method that's not utilizing non-ordinary states or expanded states in such a powerful manner. So, psychedelics, of course, are the most, they're consistent, reliable, and, been around forever. And, manipulation of the breath in various cultures and is one of the most common ways to do it. So Stan incorporated, the breathing, into a certain kind of type of breathing, into basically you could call it, a non-drug psychedelic therapy. That's really what it is, because the model is based on, his model of LSD psychotherapy. So, and it of course evolved and grew and, into what it is today. It's just fantastic,
Yeah.
So, to get back to your question, I mean, there's so much personal healing, and then what I've witnessed and observed in big groups. I mean, I was really fortunate that Stan would enlist me to do music sometimes in these bigger events. The insight, specifically insight and openings, where Stan and Jack Cornfield would combine the holotropic breathwork with Vipassana meditation for a week, and it was just groups of 200, and so we got 100 people breathing at one time. I mean, it's pretty fantastic energy field, as you could imagine, and just observing what happens with 4 people and 2 people and through people. Still, it's just when I think about it and start describing some of the things that I've witnessed and observed and experienced, it almost sounds like, making the stuff up,
Right.
unless you've been around it. I mean, if you've been around it, of course, it's like trying to explain a psychedelic experience someone who's never had it before, never taken a plant or, substance. There's no way you can really convey that, so it has to be experienced. And that's the same with the breathwork for sure. So,
yeah. It's really interesting to pitch breathwork. It doesn't seem like something that would make sense, but it has been very impressive for me and a lot of people I know, just how much breath and group and in a safe environment really does it.
Yeah, well, it really reinforces that whole concept, and is beyond a concept, of course, of set and setting, and being skillful at being able to create set and setting, and in the ways, the better someone does that, the more potent it's going to be, and the more potential is going to be there for transformation of various kinds. So being attentive to that is, I think, that's just primary. The rest, it's important, but setting, as the saying goes way back, years and years and years ago, set and setting is everything. Mm-hmm. Set and setting is everything. So, and I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. It is everything. And a big portion of that concept, like you said, is somebody who has done their own work. I think that's really understated in a lot of places. Like perhaps you went to a bunch of years of therapy as part of your analytic training or master's level counselor training, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you did your own work and dug deep.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Because, the work itself, the wounds, once you start working in non-ordinary states, you see that these, psychodynamic issues or, stuff, there's many facets to it that go way beyond with personality. We start getting into the archetypal influences and how all of that relates, and the collective, and then, of course, past lives or previous incarnations. What we bring in, it gets really complex. So, oh my gosh, I'm working on my mother issues again or something like that. Yeah. And this is new, and this is new, and this is new. Each time, different facets, different nuances of the same, of the foundational dynamic that may be there. If you're working with mother on, this is family of origin stuff, what about the cosmic mother? What about mother with a capital M and your relationship there? And so it continues, and that's where Stan's notion of his idea of a coex system, a system of condensed experiences, is so brilliant and gives a framework for what I'm describing right now. And so we got a map, and you can, when you're doing this work and it's coming up and you're working it through, then, there's all kinds of possibilities, limitless possibilities. This is fantastic.
Right. And another interesting thing is the kind of the difference between Grof's training model, this 2-year program of lots of in-person retreats, not lots, 5 or 6. And then over the course of 2 years, and then comparing that to kind of our modern training.
Yeah, it takes a couple of years to do it, minimum, right. For most people. Yeah.
Right. And that's a nice thing, because it's not just spacing out the education, it's spacing out your process a little bit. Whereas a lot of people might want to go hot and heavy right into, 3 months of ayahuasca every day. It's like, well, why don't you deal with your real world and integrate that with your process a little bit better, maybe.
Well, you just brought up the key word there, and that's integrate, the integration. And with the holotropic model, in the trainings and everything, the integrative component is not included. It's not a part of it. Mm-hmm. It's certainly reinforced, but it's not a part of it. And that's where most people, fall short. And it's also where the rubber meets the road. If you're going to assimilate, integrate, I like the digestion metaphor. So.
Totally, yeah.
Assimilation, and elimination. So we need to work with people to, really skillful people in order to, I think, adequately integrate the material that's coming through and the wounds that are getting addressed and exposed, Otherwise, I think life can get a lot messier, if you don't have somebody or some way to support the integrative process. Most people, what I've found, and that's certainly true for me, is you're not going to integrate it on your own, because this material is just loaded with really difficult, challenging, the psychodynamic wounds and narcissistic wounds and all the things that happen. I mean, we all have scars. I like what Angela Sarian also said. She said, we're all members of the scar clan. And we all have our wounds, and so just to go into them without, I guess, where I am certainly at this phase of my life is that I don't see these things as clinical issues or something that that needs to necessarily be healed. Who knows how long this stuff takes, so, but it's the work, Ram Dass had a phrase I loved. He said, at some point you just do your practices because you do your practices, not for any other reason. There's no goal, I mean, suffering brings us to this kind of work, obviously. But as we move along and mature, it becomes something different. It's, we start living our practices, being our practices, as opposed to doing our practices. And that's a beautiful thing. And so there becomes curiosity about what's next. Oh, there's some more of that mother stuff, and you can look at it as like, oh no, this again. you can really look at it and explore it with curiosity and sometimes a sense of just wonder. So that's so different than when we first start doing personal work.
Right.
Because it's grueling and hard and, yucky, all the, so. I mean, everybody knows what I'm talking about if they're listening to something like this, so, yeah.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Thank you. So regarding music, were you essentially building playlists ahead of time, or were you doing some live mixing in sessions at Insight and Opening?
At the Insight and Opening, I was really fortunate. My one job was to do the music. Mm-hmm. So I would approach that with wide open. I'd have probably an opener, one or two, three tracks that, I knew it was going to play at first, so I could get the sound dialed in and all that, and not be paying attention to the actual mixing too much and putting together a sequence. But then, the beauty is that I could just respond to what was going on in the room. I mean, there's a certain trajectory that needs to be followed in that model that just follows the usual trajectory of people's processes, But I would have all kinds of, back then we had, guys still having cassette tapes and CDs, and I even had a DAT player, a digital audio tape that was really nice, and have longer sequences in there in case something, one of the units, the tech, like if a tape machine broke down, then I could go to something like that. But I was able to just mix in the moment and trust that. And that was really, I love that. It's more pressure. There's, but that's for the Insight and Openings, when that's all I have to do. But if I'm facilitating a breathwork, I would have various sessions already pre-recorded and just put those on. And then if I had time and I was free, if I wasn't required on the floor, to be working on the floor with people, then I would change it up a little bit. I'd have, laid out some CDs and different tracks and things like that I might pull in to the, and pull out the pre-recorded one and mix in this another, I'd start at a different space in the pre-recorded, playlist to I'm skilled at the mixing, so I can do that pretty well. And doesn't intimidate me in any way. I actually like it a lot. So, it's just different. And then if I'm doing an individual session with somebody, then it's just going to, I'm going to have a playlist that just probably runs, especially if it's breath work. I'm not going to change it up much.
Right.
So,
right. And that's important to know, because you're there and you have to potentially interact with them at an intense level at times.
Really be present and not being, not playing DJ too much, so.
Yeah, that's huge. Interesting. Okay. So Lenny Gibson, who you know, still mixes for his sessions, but he's got a fair amount of helpers typically. So that's a nice environment he's got set up. I think it's going to be years before I try to mix live in a session. I'm working on it. I'm practicing being a regular DJ.
Well, it's fun though. I mean, it's challenging and really will push an edge. But that's how you get there,
I'm excited about this application, Ableton, for mixing nice playlists, just because you can beat match really well, mix in key nicely. And I think those are elements that I think could really up the game of a lot of playlists that people use.
Oh, yeah. I mean, technology allows us to do just amazing stuff. The Ableton Live, you can just throw things in there and move it around, especially if you got an integrated hardware unit, to help you with all of that, that's be fun. Yeah.
Okay. So for breathwork session, we kind of have this trajectory of what there's this initiation kind of build up thing. And maybe we should pause for a moment and just say that you've built a number of CDs that have great tracks for breathwork and psychedelic sessions. I've used a bunch of your music and it's always gone well. But Yeah. Anything like, how do you like to talk about the trajectory in breathwork versus psychedelic sessions?
Yeah, it's quite different. And the music I would choose in most cases would be different. Because if I'm doing an MDMA session, I'm going to want some stuff that's more heart-centered, not necessarily energized, but really heart-centered, be able to really sit and with, if it's psilocybin mushrooms or something, then it's going to be another thing, more shamanic pieces, more drumming and rhythms at times. But the sequences are, just so different between the two methods that, the breath work, just because it's designed as such, will, there'll be the kind of hour 1, hour 2, hour 3, if you're looking at the Grof model. Or in the way I typically do it is more of a 2-hour model, 2 hour and 15 minutes, the same trajectory, but just a shorter session. You just need to get things moving and support the breath, or deeper, faster breathing. And just high, up-tempo driving, drumming, tribal stuff. And some of the stuff I do is just, perfect for that, of course. And that keeps different tempos, and just keep it going, keep it interesting. And then it'll, after a while, after consciousness shifts and changes, then they're kind of, transitioning to some more journey-oriented things that get a little more, a little more movement to them in a different way. I like to use soundtracks a lot. I used to anyway. I don't
film
use
scores
too much now because I don't.
Film scores?
It's just movie film. Yeah, film scores. Film
I love those too. Hans Zimmer's amazing.
They're
so many good ones.
They're scored for an emotional journey, and so and there's some composers are just so good, and so, I'll buy a CD just for one track, if it works really well. There'll be often, I would intersperse some soundtracks, film score tracks with some of my own, I keep the drumming going because people come, want to work with me because they like the music I'm doing. And so a lot of difference in a perhaps, going to another Grof facilitator and myself is that you're going to hear a lot more of my music during my sessions because I know how they work, and people come for that. So that's part of what they want to experience. They want me to facilitate my own what I create, so there can be a peak and what some people call a breakthrough track, where it just kind of it culminates into something, or an apex kind of thing, and then slowly starts going into different qualities of the heart, and the personal, interpersonal, and transpersonal aspects of heart, heart-oriented music, and that's where some of the great classical stuff can come in. And it's just so many things you can use.
Right.
And slowly moving down into, what we call the integrative phase, slower, easier, less rhythmic, and, bringing people back home. So, so that's the quick, so.
The quick and dirty, yeah, for sure.
The quick overview, yeah.
This is realistically a 12-hour conversation, but maybe longer. But yeah, totally. It's not absolutely rocket science to create good enough music, though it can get really complicated if you want to create something that's really, really high quality. And translating, that's the trick. Yeah, because there's a quality of, of choosing which tracks are going to work together in a sequence. There's that piece. There's also then the technical aspects of let me stay with that first part there. So the sequence, is not just one track to one track. You're really thinking about a sequence of, okay, how is this next 20 or 30 minutes going to be? Right. So in that, there may be five tracks, right, or more. How do those work together? And where are what I call a thread of continuity? How does that work through, all of it?
So it's not just feeling disjointed, a bunch of tracks butted up against each other, right? And crossfaded. So do they work together in some way? Do they feel like they're a theme of some sort? And that's what I go for. I mean, not everybody does that, but that's what I like to do and think about it that way. So as I'm thinking about this track, I'm also thinking about the track that's, 5 tracks down the road and on the timeline. And so I think about it like that. So that's an art form. So it's not a technical thing. The technical thing is how do you weave them together in the crossfades, and blending them in a real musical and skillful way. And so, in editing, you might need to edit some things. And then there's the technical parts. How do you get the levels balanced and working with the EQ? Because a track from one album to the next may be really radically different in terms of the dynamics and the overall EQ, just the sonic character of it. And so those things need to, in a certain way, those transitions and, again, a continuity of something needs to be there. They want something that a real high soprano voice coming biting through your ear after something that's kind of nice and mellow, So that may sound common sense like, but I'll tell you, I've experienced some stuff and heard some things that I thought were pretty awful, It was hard for me to listen to. And but again, the music's subjective. And all of this is subjective. I don't use a lot of electronic music, and I use some electronic music, but it's usually some of my collaborators like Steve Roach,
right.
Or Eric Wallow, really like the best. But I don't use electronic dance music or any of that in my breath work. But a lot of people do, and it works fine. I like to keep it a little more in the organic realm, even if it's electronic. People like Steve and Eric know how to, they're coming from a place that's really earthy and grounded, and so. But that's a subjective preference there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know some folks I've been doing breathwork with for a long time who will pick tracks that just don't jive with me. Mm-hmm. I'll say something like, that's a really tacky track. What did you do that for? And they get really insulted. It's not tacky. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, yeah, I guess you're right that's a little bit subjective. But I guess the real trick is like the jarring transitions between songs. So that's going to take some. That takes me out of process. And so I would say that's an error. That's not skillful. You want to keep people in process and to support and sustain the trance state, And so anything that's, that doesn't do that, I would look at it, so. Right. And this is an interesting point. Like, how do we keep the person in process for as long as possible? And how that is not necessarily matching with how modern psychotherapy might want to operate. So a lot of people would want to check in or interrupt or things like that, when perhaps the person it's ideal for the person to just stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, you could be doing a great music set and all of those components are really working together, and the person might not like the music at all. They're just projecting all over it, and just not resonating with it. And that is the process, of course. So there's no way that we can kind of make it happen, of course. And so we do the best we can, and then you trust, As Stan Grof he said, well, how do you do this? He said, well, you just breathe deeper and faster than normal and take what you get. And, that's the best way to think about it. We all come in with agendas and intentions and preferences and all this stuff, and all that's great. That's part of the set and setting. And ultimately, we need to let it go, and surrender to that deeper wisdom that's there for all of us, There's something higher, bigger, that's at work here that we want to make contact with and surrender to. So that's the goal. And sometimes if people are projecting on the music, they're not liking the music, sometimes changing it to be good, other times not.
Right.
And really, because it's really, maybe it is bringing up a great piece for them. And they're saying, I don't like this. And of course, that's projecting onto the music. What's going on underneath that? See? I've got a great story. When I was in a training, and we were in a big training, I forget, 70 people, something like that, in Dahlonega, Georgia. It was one of Jackie's modules, and I was in the training, and Greg Zalonka was handling the music that time, and back then we were using cassette tapes, and he was actually on the floor, and I was breathing, and it was summertime in Georgia. It was a big conference center, but it was air conditioner on and everything. It was fine. And this piece of music came on, and one of my edges I had to always work was not getting caught up thinking about the music, because I'm so this music is my life,
Right.
And so here we are, and I'm breathing, and I'm getting really agitated. And this piece of music came on, and I swear it was Christmas music of some kind. It was some Christmas carol or something. And I was just like, what the hell? And, it was, I couldn't believe it. I got really angry, and I was thinking, what is going on? And so later, after the then I kind of moved around, but I was still kind of had this, I wanted to talk to Greg about it. And I kind of confronted him. I said, what the hell are you doing playing Christmas music in July, And he looked at me and smiled and said, what are you talking about? And I said, let me see that playlist. And he had written down on it. I looked at it. Of course, there was no Christmas music there. It's just what my process was. And I was completely projecting onto him and that, So that happens a lot. That kind of thing happens a lot. It's a great metaphor and an analogy for knowing how the wisdom of this work is, the tricksters at play all the time, And, if we learn to navigate it well, then we can get a lot out of it. And, but that was really a lesson. That was so good, so.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And it's a really great specific example of like projection and process. And I'm sure you've got all sorts of background of Christmas. One probably most Americans do.
Yeah, in both ways. I project and certainly get projected on, and that's fine. You can't eliminate projections.
No.
The best we can do is to see it and own it and work with it skillfully.
Yeah,
in fact,
absolutely.
The projections are an important part because everything's a mirror, if you look at it that way. So how is it going to get reflected back to you if you're not projecting?
Right. Yeah.
So that's the
exactly.
way, that's the way I approach it. I don't see it as a bad thing. It only becomes, clunky and difficult when people won't own their projections and won't see it for what it is. So. Anyway, right. That's we could do a whole module on that, so.
Right. I guess for people who are interested in that, we just put out a free class called Psychedelics in the Shadow, where you can dig in with a number of professionals on that topic. Yeah, it's really helpful to understand that dynamic. And it's, like the more we can become aware of around how our mind is operating, psyche's operating, the better, largely.
Yeah. Well, that is part of that is the essence of personal work. There's healing wounds and all of that, but becoming, how our life can improve and relationships improve, and we get more skillful and peaceful with how we can live our lives. And a big part of that is really, seeing our own stuff when it's happening. You're not going to eliminate it. You just need to see it and work with it effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tremendous. Absolutely. So do you have like advice for people like learning how to mix? Should they just start playing with it and learn kind of naturally over time and not try to rush it? Or is there a program or book you might tell people to check out?
Well, I don't, the mixing that you're talking about, and that's
the more technical aspects than like track selection.
Well, there's, there's beginner's guide to home recording kind of stuff, and there's all kinds of stuff online now, tutorials and all kinds of things, and some of the beginning DJ stuff is helpful, because that's what you can think about what we do in these sessions is more like DJ work, right? As opposed to the kind of mixing many parts of an instrument into one track, like in my studio, which is much more complex. So if you're working with 2 or 3 different tracks and mixing them, then the DJ role is more appropriate there. So just learning like that and playing around. Most people now are using the streaming platforms. I know people doing, in fact, in the psychedelic community, the underground community, of course, and even in the research studies and stuff, they're using Spotify and other streaming platforms to put together sessions. And, you can do crossfades and things like that, but it's limited because you can't edit a track. In other words, if a track has a long, especially for breathwork, if it's got like a long intro or ending, you might want to edit that out in some software before you start using it. And so the streaming platforms won't support that kind of thing. So you need to learn how to do some of that. And there's many. You mentioned Ableton, but Ableton is a little, unless you're fairly, savvy with some of the technology, that can be pretty, daunting.
Yeah, that's not where people should start, I don't think. Yeah. Like a normal DAW, Audacity is a great free place to start. Get your feet wet.
Audacity is fine, and just play around and have fun. Yeah, that's the main thing. It's going to be if that's not something that you're normally comfortable with and you do all the time, expect there to be a learning curve and to get really frustrated, and just stay with it and have fun. Because there's it's. You don't have to get an A in it. It's not an achievement course, really. Right. You're just learning about how this stuff works, And at some point, for most people, they get through that learning curve and then, oh, yeah, this is how that works. There's a click that happens. And then you're at another level of comfort and it becomes pretty natural. And then you can have a lot more fun, rather than just trying to pay attention to learning, the software stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's the essential things. I'm taking a number of courses online right now, and like music theory and DJing, how to make a mixtape, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, just this idea of mixing in key, like you said, themes, energy, like tracking the energy of the track in a sense. Like, is it the same? Exactly. Is it higher energy, lower energy? It's important to know. And those things are probably the first things people might check out. Beyond just the becoming somewhat proficient in the software. Yeah.
And then, and play them for people. Have people, listen to them. You don't have to do breath work or anything. Just lay down and listen to the playlist and give you feedback. Do some cannabis maybe, but even that, is going to, you start projecting on the music in a different way. I know if I'm, I'll listen to one of my playlists on some cannabis and it can be just really fantastic. And then it's just kind of, but it's always different because I'm in this expanded state and things are, it's different than just being, okay, I'm sober here and I want to be as objective as I can in my subjective experience so that I can provide feedback to somebody.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it.
So, I can't, in my studio, I can't mix, if I'm altered in any way. Even any way, it doesn't matter what it is, So I like to be just as clear as I possibly can, and because otherwise I'll come back to it later and I'll go, well, it sounded good at the time, but it doesn't now, and some people can really perform. There's a great, when I was in Nashville, here's a good story that can help in this regard. when I was in Nashville, there was a group of studio players, some of the best. They would come, A-team, first call guys, just really incredible players, played on so many hit records. And they were like a band, kind of. And they were a band, of course, when they were in the studio. But they played on so many hit records of so many different artists. And one of them liked to think, they said, I wonder if they all liked to smoke pot back then. This is in the early 80s, I think, when this happened, this experiment. And they said, it just feels so much better. So they got this producer they work with. They got the studio. It was Jacquelyn's studio, Sound Emporium. Now, because I remember where it happened, and so they decided that they will all get high and do some recording. And just to see if they were, would be better, because it felt better. And so they did, and they came back. It sounded great when they were listening to it because they were still high. And they came back the next day and listened to it and said, this doesn't work at all, because it just wasn't, there's a saying is that the tape doesn't lie. And so, it is what it is. And so they decided, okay, that was a good experiment, but we're not going to do it that way. Because, the careers depend on this, and they're serving the producer and the artist and all that kind of thing, by being these great studio players. And they weren't at their best, even though it felt that way.
So I'm a big Phish fan, Grateful Dead fan. And interesting to note is that Phish, as they became less frequently using drugs as a band, they became, in my opinion, a lot better. A lot like,
oh yeah,
in general. Sure. Yeah. It's really interesting to note that.
Yeah. Back in the 70s, I did a lot of alcohol and cocaine and stuff like that. I thought everybody was doing it. A lot of us were. I played well. And I thought, gosh, what's it going to be? I decided to quit all that stuff. And I was it was a weird transition. And then, I was always high when I was playing live and all that kind of stuff. And in the studio as well, But after transitioning into just being, just free of all that stuff, my playing got so much better. I mean, I was just shocked at how, I had more energy. I was playing more precise and playing, it was just a much better player. It took about 3 or 4 months to get there, but after that, it was, there's no comparison, So it was, that was good to learn that,
Yeah, absolutely. And when I get in front of an audience, I pretty much will at most have 1 to 2 beers for like a 4-hour set. So I'm like just as straight as I can be, and it seems to help a lot.
Yeah, and that kind of thing's fine. I don't have.
Yeah, it's different than just guzzling whiskey.
It's just find what works for you. And I know what works for me and what doesn't, and so
right. So back to the technical stuff. So you mentioned Spotify earlier, and a lot of people are using this in psychedelic and breathwork sessions, which it's nice that it's made it so democratic. That said, I have some kind of, like this crossfading thing. It's not ideal. Like I've had one session maybe where I ran it, and there's this 8-minute tail on a song that's no good for the session. So it's like, how do I move through that? And then secondarily, like the bit rate, the audio quality is not perfect either. It's kind of a bit low, honestly, for sessions. Yeah. Do you have any kind of thoughts on bit rates or audio depth?
The audio quality, if you're streaming with Spotify, well, first of all, you got to get the premium account, so you can get at least the best bit rate of an MP3 quality. So it's still not CD quality, but it's not bad. But to really ensure that that's the way things are going to sound, you really need to download it. If you're streaming it, it's going to, most times sound like crap to me. I got a really good system here, and high-speed internet, 200 megabits per second, download and 20 up, and so it's pretty, it's good. But the difference between streaming the same track and having it downloaded to a device is pretty dramatic to me.
Right.
And so there's a consistency about it. So there's that one hint that I think if you're going to use this, other than just some background music, they really need to go that direction. The free accounts don't allow you to do any of that. So
the numbers I'm seeing here is the default is about 160 kilobytes per second. And if you download it, you can get up to 320 kilobytes, which I think is adequate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Amazon apparently goes up to 850.
That's the highest. Yeah, that's the highest you can get on an MP3, the highest bit rate. So equal to.
Right.
But still, I mean, if you're used to hearing things the way they're supposed to sound, all of this stuff sounds pretty awful to me, I mean, it just stands out because, I live in 24-bit world,
right.
So at high resolution with the best speakers and not the best speakers, but really good speakers and an acoustically treated room and all that kind of stuff. So then when you listen to this stuff, it's like,
okay, so you actually notice 320 when you're listening to something in 320 kbps on an MP3, you can tell.
Oh yeah,
interesting.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. It just jumps out at me. The first thing I thought, well, something's wrong with the system or something, because it's distortion is what it is. It's just, it just sounds, it's just really good. And I turn it off when it's like, I can't go there. It's so agitating for me. Other people, it's not bothering them, and especially younger people because they grew up listening to, really compressed music. When there was another test that was done. This is several years ago. Audio engineers were wondering about, well, wait a minute, we're mixing it, these high resolutions, there's transparency and all this incredible stuff, and then it's just jammed through this funnel into this small MP3 thing, that people don't even, wonder what's the point here. Well, they brought in some young people, older teenagers, young adults in their early 20s who really knew nothing but MP3, right? And compressed sounds. And they played them an MP3 and the 24-bit master. And to a person, they all preferred the MP3. Their ears did not know how to hear and to take in, the depth and clarity and detail of what it's really like, So that was pretty discouraging for these engineers, but that's just that also serves as a metaphor for a lot of what we're dealing with in our lives right now too, and that goes off into a whole nother topic,
right? But it's worth considering. It's important.
I think you get what I mean. You know, it's just all. Anyway, I can go on and on about that, but you were talking about the crossfading. It just can't be done in a streaming platform. So you're going to have to do that in other software. It's just the name of the game. You can download, you can do digital downloads, and then you got the actual file, and then you can work with it, and then incorporate that into like an iTunes playlist. Or a playlist in like a different like Audacity or something,
Yeah, so. Absolutely. It's unfortunate that we need to do this, but it's kind of just what we've been dealt, and it's not that hard for people to really get a grasp on this. So it's just something we need to do in this world, and until we can buy 24-bit playlists from people, we gotta kind of ride this thing out.
Yeah. Well, that gets into a whole other copyright thing and all that.
So, it's going to be a really tough thing, which I don't really think there's a good solution for until we figure that out. Have you ever experimented with live music through a whole session. Years ago, we came really close to getting the Wood Brothers, I think, to play for us, which would have been really cool, but didn't end up happening. Have you seen any of that?
Yeah. Well, kind of, not like a live band. Now, Steve Roach and I assume your listeners, most listeners know who Steve Roach is. Well, we do a workshop called "Music is a Medicine," and where we're doing a lot of live stuff, and we do some breath work and some journey work. People are laying on mats in a dark room, and we're hitting them live. It's really an amazing thing. So that's one experience that I've done with it. And the other is that in my, I modified over time in my PhD research. I was really working with shamanism a lot, and part of my research was a study that was breathwork as a shamanic strategy, and so it was really like a shamanic breathwork, which I call holo-shamanic breathwork. And what it does is I use a lot of my own music and predominantly shamanic kind of music tracks, but it still follows the trajectory of a holotropic session, and but I augment it with live rattles and drumming and, doing shamanic healing, but with the drums and rattles and mainly drums and rattles and working around the individual, just like, somebody would in an ayahuasca session or something. In fact, I modeled it kind of off of that. So I do that, and then when I'm working with people individually, I often all the times incorporate drums, rattles, bowls, other healing sounds and instruments, voice and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But I want to clarify that's along with some pre-recorded things that are going on.
Right.
Because sometimes it'll be, if it's my music, sometimes it'll be the same drum and the same rattles that were in the music piece. So the thing becomes a very, very three-dimensional kind of experience for the, for the journeyer. So.
Right. Well, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit more about what you're up to these days? Like, I know you're working on an album and you do some one-on-one client work. I think outside the time of Corona.
Yeah, well,
what are you up to?
Not doing well right now. I don't know when this this podcast is going to be up, but of course, we're sheltering in place right now. So I'm in the studio a lot these days, and I'm in the studio a lot anyway. But I'm not working with in-person clients right now, just because I can't. And but generally, I have a kind of a mix of. I do a lot of work with clients on Skype and phone, and so I have that. Whether it's mentoring or teaching or more of a shamanic counseling kind of thing. And, just the studio work is now just a big focus, just because I have more time to do it. But before the, or this lockdown, this coronavirus thing happened, we have people come here different, maybe for an afternoon to do a breath work or longer, to do, more deeper shamanic work. And for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days sometimes. I have people come who want to integrate their own inner work, various kinds, with some training around, the studio work. So it becomes a kind of a combination of a master class and inner work, back and forth. And that's a very cool thing to be able to, go really have some deep experience and then take that the next day into the studio to see, okay, what does that mean for the person now? How do they experience themselves and their creative impulses after that, sitting in this again, set and setting, So it depends on what the client or the student's wanting, and we kind of co-create a retreat kind of thing, and it's great. I love working that way. So
yeah, it's really neat. Co-creating the actual situation as opposed to this is the standard offering. I think that's a big deal.
I don't have anything like that. It's usually what are your goals and objectives, and what are your visions, what do you want to do, and then we create something that fits, and then you can modify it on the fly. Just like I do. Oh, okay, that piece of music's not working. Let me change that, and so.
Yeah, that's massive. Cool. And are you still creating any CDs with that binaural beats situation?
Yeah. The last one was I have my own technology that utilizes binaural beats, what's called field effect audio technology. And the last thing I used that on was a program I did for Sounds True called the Shaman's Heart Meditation Training Program. But I also have worked with hemisync.com. It used to be called Monroe Products.
Right.
and they really have a sophisticated, they've been around forever, and their binaural beat mixes are really sophisticated and complex, and they can do some wonderful stuff. But what they do is just, they just add their hemisync to, an album that I've made. And in this case, the most recent one was Persistent Visions that I did with Mark Selig, a long form, a beautiful, great journey. This is great for people working with MDMA. In fact, that's where, Mark and I both did that intentionally. I said, what would be, this is, of course, is shorter. It's about 70 minutes, but the trajectory of the music really was scored and mixed specifically for something like that. And it's got several tracks, but it all blends together, and the tempo slowly moves up and then back down. It's really a beautiful album. And so there was a hemisync version of that. They call it meta music, where they just, mix in the hemisync with the existing album. And that's the last one that we did. That came out last year. So
that's great. And for those who don't necessarily know about binaural beats or any of these proprietary companies, like what specifically do you kind of like about it?
Well, first of all, done appropriately, what the binaural beats do will actually just synchronize both hemispheres of the brain to entrain into certain brain states. And so for my music, it can be for meditation or that kind of thing, but or healing work or, focused learning and, sleep, different approaches. And, if you're working with a delta state, then you're going to have, delta frequencies predominantly to help you sleep. And for journey work, though, the theta state is the most ideal. Because you don't get too out there. Because, the idea is you want to bring something back if you're going to integrate it. So the theta state takes you far enough out to be able to you're really in an altered, expanded state here, but you're also able to navigate it and bring things back. So a lot of this is where creativity comes in. This is a theta state is kind of when you're just in that twilight, just before waking up, and creative impulses come through and ideas. So the theta is where I work with in my own technology the most. And so you're just in the music. The music is designed to do this on its own. And if you incorporate the brain entrainment technology, hemisync or mine, it enhances it. And it's especially effective for those people who may have difficulty in entering into altered states or expanded states, because it's just going to work. You put on the headphones and listen, and the technology will do it for you. So it really is it cuts to the chase pretty nicely. And I was stunned the first time when my first, the Shaman's Heart came out, and we did, that was the first thing I did with hemisync.com. And when I listened to the proofs that they did, I was stunned at how altered I got listening to this album that I was almost sick of. I'd been listening to it so much. I'd recorded it and mixed it, mastered it, and, it'd been out for a while. And then they did this, and boy, I was impressed. And so I really recommend it, especially for those who have a hard time or, are challenged by getting into the journey state, because it will help you get there a lot quicker. I mean, it's very effective.
Interesting. Cool.
And it's really safe, It's super safe, The only thing is recommended, and this is a theoretical recommendation for a contraindication would be a history of seizure disorders or something like that. Theoretically, it could trigger seizures, but we've not ever heard of a case of that happening. So,
that's good to know. I suppose I could see that. I've seen people have seizures just from those kind of REM light machines, I don't know what they're called, but yeah, it's like, that's interesting. But 1 in 3,000 people maximum. So it's pretty good odds,
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. So, Byron, we're at about an hour 10. Is there anything you might want to let our audience know before we wrap here that we haven't covered?
No, I don't, not really. I mean, I'm just happy to, be a part of, sharing part of my life and what I do. And I'm, grateful that people are interested in it. And of course, I still work. I can't imagine not working. People say, well, when are you going to retire? And I said, well, I don't know. That doesn't feel good to me.
Right.
I like to be creative. I like to be interacting with people and working with people, and in a variety of ways. So people are interested in my work center. My website's byronmetcalf.com and the holoshamanicstrategies.org. And there's, my Bandcamp sites for the music and all of that. If they're interested in the healing work that I'm doing and this kind of stuff, the Holoshamanic Strategies is the place for all that. You can find out about what I'm doing and shaman's heart training and all that kind of thing. And but just, listen to the music, pass it on. And, because it's just really, we create this music. I create this music, to help people. And it helps me to create it. And, the idea is to have something out there that can support us in going deeper and healing ourselves, and particularly in healing. And, an extension of that, obviously, is healing the planet and our global concerns, because we're in trouble here, and big time. And there's no guarantees that this human experiment's going to be successful. And maybe it is at one level, but even if we take ourselves out, well, that was interesting. That's one way to look at it. Stan Grof for a long time has said, we need to do this work, or our literal survival depends on it. And I tend to agree with Stan on that one. I tend to agree with Stan on most stuff. He's an incredible teacher and has been such a positive influence. I've worked with lots of great teachers. I mean, lots. But Stan stands out of the one who probably made the most, was most important in my development. So.
Right. So, maybe another takeaway besides checking out your CDs and your offering, It Sounds True. Check out some Grof books. Yeah. People should really be reading Grof in this space. And it seems like most people are not reading Grof in this space.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But, that can always be changed. And that's kind of a big part of our mission here at Psychedelics Today, is to make sure Grof is part of the conversation.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. I mean, he's there's a real father, to all of what we've been talking about. He's the guy,
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's just an amazing scholar. He's, I could just tell so many stories, but that's for another time. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Byron Metcalf, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope everybody checks you out.
Well, me too. And thanks, Joe, for the invite. And have a good one, and stay safe and well, everybody.
And there you have it, everybody. Byron Metcalf, PhD, on Psychedelics Today. If you liked it, let us know. We would love to hear from you. We've got a really big Facebook group now at Facebook. Just search for Psychedelics Today group. You'll definitely find it over there. If you want to let us know directly, hit us up on social media or email us, psychedelicstodayemail@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And again, if you want to support the show, leave us a review on Facebook or your podcast app. Tell a friend. I was just at an event over the weekend and had all sorts of great people telling me they listen to the show. It's wild, and just really happy to hear that. And that's how they find out. It's 1-to-1. So you just share it. Oh, maybe you're ready to hear about ibogaine, or you're ready to hear about ayahuasca healing for addiction or whatever. Or perhaps you want to hear from the folks at Dose to talk about ibogaine as an intervention for opiate addiction. It's pretty wild, and a lot of people might be really interested to hear that because it's a hot topic, and maybe it's time. So I think that's it for now, everybody. Really want to thank you for tuning in. Without you, this would not happen. So thank you, and we will see you on the next episode. This is Joe Moore signing off for Psychedelics Today from Breckenridge, Colorado. Bye-bye.